Prime Minister calls on voters to reject blackmail when they cast their vote on Sunday's referendum, as the opposition yes vote holds a slight lead in the polls. UN Human Rights Council adopts resolution condemning Israel over Gaza war report. And Turkey has deployed additional troops and arms along its border with Syria. Good evening. Welcome to i24News. I'm Danny Swibel. Almost 45% of Greeks are now in favor of accepting credit bailout terms, according to polls this morning, compared to the 43.4% voting against accepting the terms. With just 48 hours before a referendum, the vote could decide whether Greece gets another last-ditch financial rescue in exchange for more harsh austerity measures. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras is calling voters to reject blackmail when they vote in the referendum, insisting Greece's presence in the EU was not at stake.
Whatever we choose on Sunday, on Monday there will be absolutely nothing to divide us. Nobody doubts our presence in Europe. A no to a not viable solution does not mean a break with Europe. It means the continuation of negotiations with better terms for the Greek people. So I invite you all to say no to ultimatums, to blackmail, to the campaign of terror.
I call on every Greek man and on every Greek woman, above and beyond parties, to stand united as united people in support of the yes vote for a Greece that stays in Europe and in the Euro. I call on all Greeks, regardless of their political beliefs, to be united when they go to the polls. Most importantly, no matter what their vote is, to remain united the day after. The unity of our people is our strength.
And earlier we spoke to Walla News global editor Amir Leventhal, who is covering the Greek debt crisis in Athens, and provided this analysis.
The Greek nation is divided. You know, we witness an increasing polarization between the youth and the old people, and between the rich and the poor, between the right and the left, politically speaking. It is a chaos. You know, people today there are talks that no much more money left in the banks. You know, only about €500 million, which should not last more than 2 days. So deep concern. All the shops are empty. So you don't see anyone buying anything. People are very afraid and worried, and they don't know what's going to happen if the yes win or if the no win. That's the biggest problem. You know, that no one knows the exact implications of whether the yes win or the no win. So. Yeah, this nation is in deep trouble, and they all wish to be in the next week and, to start doing something and to solve this situation somehow.
And the UN Human Rights Council decided on Friday to adopt a resolution condemning Israel over the UN report into the Operation Protective Edge in Gaza. 41 countries voted in favor of adopting the report. 5 abstained and only 1, the United States, voted against it. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responded, saying, quote, the UNHCR isn't interested in the facts or human rights. We are now joined on our phone by diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev. Good evening, Tal. Thank you for being with us.
Good evening, Danny.
Again, we're experiencing a face-off between the UN and Israel. Is there ever going to be an end to this? And can we ever expect the U.S. to not support Israel like it does?
Well, at the moment, the Israeli Prime Minister is very grateful for the U.S. decision to oppose the UN Human Rights Council, and the U.S. has adopted Israel's main claim against the UN Human Rights Council that it is an anti-bias body, and this is, of course, at the heart of the Israeli response this evening to the UN Human Rights Council vote. As can be expected, Israel did refuse to cooperate with the Commission due to the hostile anti-Israel bias that historically has been depicted in the UN Human Rights Council. Netanyahu does also state again that the Council has taken more resolutions against Israel than against all other countries combined. But Israel was engaged in a very intense diplomatic campaign ahead of the vote, even though the majority was guaranteed due to the large Arab country bloc in the Council. But Israel did try to persuade as many countries as possible, A, to soften the wording of the resolution, and B, to abstain or oppose the vote. So we do see a positive point from Israel's point of view, a considerably softened wording, much more moderate than some of the draft resolutions that were circulated earlier this week. And we do see 5 countries that have decided to abstain. Netanyahu does especially express his appreciation to India, to the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This is Netanyahu does mention that he has spoke to Modi earlier this week, and for India, this is the first time that it has defied the anti-Israel majority. On the other hand, we do see that European countries voted for the vote in what could see as probably a failure of the Israeli goal to maintain a quality vote of European countries. But as you mentioned, the U.S. opposed, and Netanyahu does tweet earlier this evening a grateful tweet thanking President Obama for standing by Israel.
Tal Shalev, diplomatic correspondent, thank you very much for your updates. And we're going to stay in Israel with a silent alert sounding in the Eshkol Region Council on the outskirts of the Gaza Strip near the border with Egypt. The IDF confirmed the rockets were fired from the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt and not from the Gaza Strip. Last week, a rocket was fired from the Gaza Strip close to the southern Israeli city of Ashkelon. And earlier, we talked to Yisrael Hayom military analyst Yoav Limor, who talked about the latest attack from Sinai.
Two rockets being fired from Sinai towards Israel. We've seen such events in the past, but they were aimed mainly at the city of Eilat, which is being guarded by Iron Dome system. The area of Eshkol, which was targeted today, is not protected the same, but the amount of civilians over there is much fewer. Anyway, we see the connection between the Salafis in Gaza, which were responsible for the previous attacks that we've seen last week towards Israeli cities, and the attack that we've seen today. And as we see, Hamas is trying to stop those attacks, and Israel sent a very clear message both to Egypt and Hamas that if they don't succeed in doing so, Israel might need to take things into its hands.
And over now to Britain, which held an official minute's silence at midday to mourn the British tourists killed at a Tunisian beach last week. Flags are being flown at half-mast over Whitehall and Buckingham Palace for those killed in this deadly terror attack for Britons since the bombing in London on July 7, 2005. 38 people, 30 of which were UK nationals, were killed in an attack on the beach at the Tunisian resort. And Turkey has deployed additional troops and arms along its border with Syria as fighting north of Aleppo intensifies. But the Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu said there were no immediate plans for any incursion. Some media speculated an imminent cross-border operation was being planned. Meanwhile, intense fighting, including explosions, could be heard from the Turkish town of Kilis. Here's more from the i24News desk.
The Turkish government has ordered Turkey's military to act if its security is threatened across the border with Syria. Security sources in the capital, Ankara, also said the Turkish army had already stepped up security along part of the border, deploying special forces as heavy fighting is reported north of Aleppo.
It's true that we have taken precautions to protect our border. If there's any circumstance across the border that threatens Turkish security, orders to act have been given. But it is not true that there is a disagreement between the government and the army.
Witnesses said intense fighting could be heard from the Turkish border town of Kilis late on Thursday, about 50 kilometers north of the Syrian city of Azaz. The security sources said the fighting was between Islamic State militants and a joint force of Al-Qaeda's Syrian offshoot Nusra Front and Western-backed rebels who have been clashing in the North Aleppo countryside for weeks. Some media have meanwhile speculated an imminent cross-border operation was being planned. Officials deny any incursions into Syria are on the table. Both Ankara and Damascus have accused each other of cooperating with Islamic State militants in attacking the moderate opposition in Syria.
And those are your latest reports from i24 News from the Jaffa port in Israel. Be sure to join us again in 20 minutes and check us out on our website, i24news.tv. I'm Danny Swibel. Thank you for watching.